I thought I knew her. That's the most painful part of this. I thought I knew my wife like the back of my hand. But last Tuesday, everything I believed in came crumbling down with the smallest, most mundane object, a key. It started when I was cleaning the house. Well, more accurately, I was hunting for my headphones, which she had a habit of borrowing. While rummaging through her handbag, I found this sleek, unfamiliar key. It was black, shiny, and had a weird label scratched into it, apartment 32B. My first thought was practical. It didn't match anything in our house. Not our front door, not the office, not even our car. Then a strange chill ran through me. Why would my wife need a key to an apartment? When she came home that evening, I casually brought it up. "Hey, I found this key in your bag. What's it for?" Her reaction was instantaneous, and I'll never forget it. Her eyes widened, and her lips pressed together into that thin, defensive line she gets when she's cornered. Then, instead of answering, she exploded. "Why are you snooping through my stuff?" she shrieked, snatching the key from my hand like I was some kind of burglar. "I wasn't snooping," I said, trying to stay calm. "I was looking for my headphones. You always put them in your bag." "Well, maybe you shouldn't be so careless with your things," she snapped. And just like that, the conversation shifted from the key to my apparent incompetence. It was a masterclass in deflection, but I wasn't letting this go. "Okay, Phoenix, but what's the key for?" "God, you're so boring," she hissed, throwing her hands up. "Do you seriously have nothing better to do than interrogate me? It's for my gym locker. Are you happy now?" I wasn't happy, and I wasn't convinced. The key didn't look like it belonged to a gym. Still, she stormed out of the room before I could press further, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I sat there, stewing in my own unease. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the way she acted, it didn't sit right. My gut was screaming at me. Something was off. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, she was all smiles and sweetness, like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek while I poured my coffee and chirped something about going to yoga class later. That's her pattern, you know? After every argument, she pretends it never happened. It's easier than actually addressing the issue. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling about the key. The way she overreacted, her anger, the gym locker excuse, it didn't add up. I couldn't just let it go. Not this time. So I started paying closer attention. Not in an obvious way, of course. I wasn't about to become one of those paranoid husbands snooping through phones or following her around like a creep. But I started noticing things I hadn't before. Her sudden influx of late-night work meetings, her phone always on silent, and the way she'd guard her handbag like it held state secrets. And then there were the lies. Small ones at first. She told me she was meeting her friend Rachel for lunch on Saturday, but Rachel posted an Instagram story from her kid's soccer game at the exact same time. I asked her how lunch went, and she just smiled and said, "Oh, you know Rachel. She never shuts up." The ease with which she lied made my stomach churn. I decided to test the waters. That night, I casually brought up the key again, keeping my tone light. "So, did you get a chance to use that gym locker key today?" I asked while we were watching TV. Her body stiffened just for a second, but enough for me to notice. "Oh yeah, I did," she said, not looking at me. "It's super convenient. Thanks for asking." I smiled and nodded, pretending to believe her. But I knew she hadn't gone to the gym. I checked her location history on our shared Google account earlier that day. She'd been nowhere near the gym. Instead, her phone pinged from a completely different part of town. The address for an upscale apartment complex. I don't even remember the rest of the evening. My mind was in overdrive, trying to make sense of it all. Was I overreacting? Misinterpreting the signs? Or was I finally seeing the cracks in the foundation of our marriage? By the time she fell asleep, I had made up my mind. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. The next day, while she was at her so-called yoga class, I drove to the apartment complex. My heart was pounding the entire time, my palms slick with sweat as I gripped the steering wheel. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd get there and find nothing. But when I parked and walked into the lobby, I noticed something that made my chest tighten, a security keypad for key access. And there, staring me in the face, was a little sticker with the name of the leasing office, apartments at 32B. The same number as the key. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the building, debating my next move. Did I march upstairs and confront whoever was behind that door? Did I go home and confront her? Or did I stay quiet and dig deeper? I chose the third option. It was risky, sure, but I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. And I had a feeling that key was just the tip of the iceberg. I spent the next few days meticulously planning my next move. I couldn't rush this. I needed concrete evidence before confronting her. Something she couldn't twist or explain away. Every evening, she went on about her yoga class, leaving me alone in the house with nothing but my racing thoughts. Each time she walked out the door, I felt like a fool, but I reminded myself to stay calm. The truth would come soon enough. On Friday, I decided to use the key. I couldn't wait any longer. She was out at one of her late-night work meetings, and I drove back to the apartment complex, my hands trembling on the wheel. The key in my pocket felt like a burning secret. When I arrived, the lobby was empty. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I stepped inside and made my way to the elevator. I pressed the button for the third floor and clenched the key in my fist. What would I find behind that door? A lover? A secret life I didn't know about? Or maybe, just maybe, I was wrong and there was some rational explanation for all of this. The elevator doors opened, and I followed the hallway to the unit marked 32B. My stomach churned as I slid the key into the lock. It turned easily, and the door clicked open. The apartment was eerily quiet. I stepped inside, and the first thing that hit me was the smell, a faint floral perfume I didn't recognize. The space was neat, sparsely furnished, like a place someone used but didn't live in. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a coffee table strewn with items. A bottle of wine, 2 glasses, and a man's jacket draped over the back of the sofa. I walked further inside, my shoes silent on the hardwood floor. In the bedroom, the bed was unmade, the sheets tangled like someone had left in a hurry. And then I saw a photo on the nightstand. It was her, my wife, sitting on a beach with a man I didn't recognize. He had his arm around her, and they were both laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. My hands shook as I picked up the frame. The photo wasn't old, it was recent. She was wearing the same sundress she'd bought for our vacation last summer. The final blow came when I opened the closet. Inside were her clothes, her shoes, things she told me she donated months ago. This wasn't just a fling. This was a second life, hidden right under my nose. I left the apartment in a daze, the photo still clutched in my hand. As I drove home, a wave of anger, humiliation, and heartbreak crashed over me. She hadn't just lied. She'd built an entire world behind my back. And now I had the proof. That night, when she came home, I didn't confront her. Not yet. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted tea, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I told her no and went to bed, the photo hidden under my pillow. I needed time to figure out my next move. But one thing was certain, our marriage was over. The next morning, I woke up before her. I couldn't sleep anyway, not with the photo burning a hole under my pillow. She lay next to me, her face serene and peaceful, like she didn't have a single guilty thought in her mind. I stared at her for a long time, trying to figure out how we got here. How did the woman I loved turn into a stranger? I didn't wait for her to wake up naturally. Instead, I shook her shoulder, gently at first, then harder. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. She blinked herself awake, groaning. "What is it? Can it wait? It's Saturday." "No, it can't." She sat up, her brow furrowing. "What's going on?" I reached under my pillow and pulled out the photo, holding it up so she could see it. Her reaction was immediate. Her face went pale, and her eyes darted away from mine. For once, she had no clever deflection, no biting comeback. Just stunned silence. "Who is he?" I demanded. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "It's not what you think," she finally stammered. "Not what I think." "Then explain it. Explain why you have an apartment I didn't know about, why your clothes are there, and why there's a picture of you and him looking like a goddamn couple." She ran a hand through her hair, avoiding my gaze. "I can explain." "Then do it." She took a deep breath, like she was preparing for a performance. It's just a place where I go to clear my head. I needed space. You've been so suffocating lately." "Suffocating?" I snapped. "That's your excuse? I've been working my ass off to support this family while you've been out playing house with some guy." Her composure cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she yelled. "I needed something for myself, okay? You're always so focused on work, on your routine, on being the perfect husband. Do you even realize how boring you are? How predictable?" Her words hit me like a slap. "So, this is my fault? You're saying I drove you to this?" She crossed her arms, her face twisting into a sneer. "Maybe if you'd been more exciting, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Wow, you've really got this down, don't you? Turning it all back on me. But here's the thing. You're the liar. You're the one who's been sneaking off and screwing around." She stood up, her eyes blazing with anger now. "You don't understand what it's like to be stuck in a marriage with someone like you. Always working, always worrying, never actually living." "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice cold. "Do you even hear yourself? You're justifying cheating because you're bored? That's your grand excuse." She didn't answer, just stared at me with that defiant look on her face, like she was daring me to do something about it. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We're done," I said, the finality of the words echoing in the room. "I'm filing for divorce. Pack your things and get out." Her expression shifted to something that almost resembled panic. "You don't mean that. You're just upset. We can fix this." "No," I cut her off. "You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and you don't even seem sorry. There's no fixing this. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She stared at me, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue, but for once, she didn't have anything to say. I walked out of the room before she could change my mind. The next thing I heard was the bedroom door slamming shut. I didn't care. My decision was made. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. After the confrontation, the house felt like a war zone, silent, tense, and ready to explode. She didn't leave immediately, of course. Instead, she stomped around, slamming cabinets, muttering under her breath about how I was overreacting and throwing away everything we built over nothing. Nothing? That word stuck in my head like a thorn. Was she seriously trying to downplay what she'd done? But I wasn't going to argue anymore. I was done giving her the satisfaction of my attention. My focus was on what came next. The first step was getting a lawyer. I called a friend who had gone through a divorce last year, and he recommended someone. By the end of the day, I had an appointment scheduled for Monday morning. I thought that would be the hardest part, taking that first step, but the real challenge came later that evening when she finally decided to talk to me again. She came into the living room, where I was sitting with my laptop, researching divorce proceedings. She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of defiance and something that almost looked like regret. Almost. "So this is it?" she asked. "You're just giving up on us?" I didn't look up from my screen. "There is no us anymore. You killed it." She sighed dramatically, walking closer and sitting down on the arm of the couch. "You're being so final about this. People make mistakes, you know? Marriages go through rough patches." I snapped my laptop shut and finally met her eyes. A rough patch is arguing about money or not spending enough time together. It's not lying, sneaking around, and renting a whole damn apartment for your affair. Her face flushed, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. But then she recovered, her voice rising. "Phoenix, yes, I made mistakes. But you're not perfect either, okay? You're always so focused on being the responsible one, the steady one. Do you even know how exhausting that is to live with?" "Exhausting?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You mean I was too busy being a good husband? Too busy working my ass off so you could have everything you wanted? Sorry if my stability didn't live up to your fantasy. She jumped up from the couch, pacing now. You never listen. You think everything is about working and paying bills and being this perfect provider. But what about me? What about what I need? What you need? I stood up, my anger finally boiling over. You mean the attention of some random guy? Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You didn't need me. You needed a fucking ego boost. Her face twisted with anger, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door to our bedroom behind her. I stayed in the living room for hours, staring at the blank TV screen, my mind a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and betrayal. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about the complete lack of accountability, the way she twisted everything to make herself the victim. I felt like I'd spent years building a life with someone who didn't even respect me, let alone love me. The silence in the house grew heavier as the hours passed. I realized this was the first time in years I didn't feel the need to fix things, to smooth over the cracks and pretend everything was fine. I went to bed that night in the guest room, locking the door behind me. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small act of reclaiming my space, my life. I didn't know what the next few weeks would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done living a lie. The weekend passed in excruciating silence. She stayed in the house, avoiding me, probably hoping I'd cool off or reconsider. But every time I caught a glimpse of her, all I could see was that photo in the apartment. Her laughing, carefree, with someone else. Every smile she'd given me since then felt like a lie. Monday morning came, and I went to the lawyer's office. The place was small but professional, the kind of place where people handle messy situations with quiet efficiency. I laid everything out, the affair, the apartment, the confrontation. I even brought the photo as proof. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, listened patiently and nodded. It's good you didn't act impulsively. We'll need to gather more evidence if you want to ensure a clean break, especially if she tries to contest anything. I asked what kind of evidence she meant, and she listed everything. Phone records, financial statements, even hiring a private investigator if necessary. The thought of prying further into her double life made my stomach churn, but I agreed. If she thought she could waltz out of this unscathed, she had another thing coming. When I got home, she was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone with a mug of coffee in hand. She didn't even look up when I walked in. The audacity of her calm demeanor was infuriating. I went straight to our shared desk and started going through her files. She always insisted on managing the household bills, claiming she was better at keeping things organized. Now I understood why. She wasn't organizing. She was hiding. It didn't take long to find the first red flag. One of the bank accounts had regular withdrawals I didn't recognize, all for the same amount like clockwork. When I cross-referenced the dates with her supposed yoga classes, it all lined up. She'd been using our money to fund her little love nest. I confronted her with the evidence that evening. I tossed the printed statements onto the table in front of her while she was eating dinner. "What's this?" she asked, her tone defensive. "You tell me," I said. "Looks like you've been siphoning money out of our account for months." Her face paled, but she quickly recovered. "I was saving for a surprise," she said, her voice trembling with fake indignation. "For us? A vacation. But I guess that's ruined now, thanks to your paranoia." I laughed bitterly. "A vacation? Is that what you were doing at 32B? Planning our getaway between sessions with your boyfriend?" Her fork clattered onto her plate, and her mask finally cracked. "You went there?" she hissed, her voice rising. "You had no right." "No right?" I shot back. "You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and I'm the one in the wrong? You don't get to play the victim here." She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I made mistakes, okay? But it's not like you've been perfect. You're distant, you're boring, and you care more about your job than you do about me." I stared at her, my anger boiling over. "You want to talk about my flaws? Fine, but at least I didn't betray you. At least I didn't lie and sneak around like a coward." Her eyes flashed, and for a moment, I thought she might throw something. But instead, she stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door to the bedroom behind her. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing down on me. Every word she'd said felt like a dagger, but I knew it was just another attempt to shift the blame. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart. This was war, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story to paint herself as the hero. If she wanted to fight, she was going to get one. The days that followed were a blur of tension and quiet chaos. We barely spoke, each word carefully chosen and loaded with the weight of everything unspoken. But I wasn't sitting idle. I was gathering everything I needed to prepare for the inevitable battle. Clara, my lawyer, had set up a meeting with a private investigator. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to be the guy who snooped, who dug into the muck to prove something I already knew. But Clara was right. If I wanted this divorce to go smoothly, I needed hard, irrefutable evidence. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Dana, didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid it out for me, tailing, documenting, and collecting proof. I gave her everything I had, the timeline, the photo, and the address of 32B. A few days later, Dana called me with her first update. "It's worse than you think," she said. "She's not just cheating. She's living a whole separate life." My stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "She's been seeing this guy for at least a year. He's not just some fling. They've got routines, groceries, dinners, even weekends at the apartment. It's like she's in a second marriage." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt like a fool, a blind, naive fool. But I needed to hear it. The truth, no matter how ugly, was better than the lies I'd been living with. That night, I confronted her one final time. This time, I wasn't angry, I was calm. Ice cold. "Dana sent me everything," I said as she walked into the kitchen. She froze, her hand halfway to the fridge. "Who's Dana?" "The investigator I hired," I replied, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "Open it." She hesitated, her face a mixture of fear and defiance. Then, with trembling hands, she opened the envelope and pulled out the photos. Her and her lover walking hand in hand in a 32B, kissing in the doorway, shopping for groceries together. Her face turned ashen, and for once, she had nothing to say. "You lied to me," I said, my voice steady. "Over and over. And now you're caught." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It just did." I laughed bitterly. "That's your excuse? It just happened? You don't accidentally rent an apartment and play house with someone else." She started crying, but I didn't feel sympathy anymore. I felt free. This wasn't a woman I could save. This wasn't a marriage I could fix. "What do you want from me?" she choked out. "An apology? Fine. I am sorry. I was lonely. I needed more. But I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I said. "You managed to destroy everything anyway." I stood up, grabbing my car keys. "You have until the end of the week to move out. I've already started the divorce process. If you fight me on this, I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done." Her sobs followed me as I left the house. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of her betrayal crushing me. I felt something else entirely. Relief. The days leading up to her move-out deadline were excruciating. The house was heavy with silence, except for the occasional slamming of doors or her stifled sobs behind closed doors. I didn't try to comfort her. That part of me, the part that cared about her feelings, her tears, was gone. She had drained it dry with every lie, every betrayal. I slept in the guest room, locking the door every night. Not out of fear, but to preserve what little space I had left. My mornings started early, leaving for work or errands before she could attempt another one of her twisted, heartfelt apologies. I didn't trust myself to keep calm if she started deflecting or blaming me again. The most surreal part? She still acted like this wasn't happening. She made coffee in the mornings, tidied the living room, and even texted me once, "We need milk." It was as if she thought ignoring the storm would make it pass. But I had no intention of letting this blow over. By Wednesday, she began packing her things. I'd hear her in the bedroom, rummaging through drawers, zipping up suitcases. It didn't feel real, watching the woman I'd shared a life with dismantle it piece by piece. Every item she packed, every photo frame, every sweater, felt like a small funeral for what we used to be. On Thursday, I came home to find a stack of boxes in the hallway. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like this was a casual Thursday night. "Is that everything?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She looked up, startled. "Almost. I'll be out by tomorrow." I nodded. "Good." She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her phone. "I never wanted it to end like this, you know." I stared at her, searching for any sign of the woman I used to love. But all I saw was someone I didn't recognize, someone who had lied and betrayed me without remorse. "Neither did I," I said. "But you made your choices." Her eyes filled with tears again, but I didn't stick around to watch. I walked past her, into the guest room, and shut the door. Friday came faster than I expected. When I got home that evening, her car was packed, the boxes and suitcases piled into the trunk and back seat. She stood by the driver's side, staring at the house like she was trying to imprint it in her memory. For a moment, I thought she'd come back inside to say goodbye. But she didn't. She opened the car door, slid into the seat, and drove away without a word. The house felt eerily quiet once she was gone. No clattering of dishes, no scent of her perfume lingering in the air. It should have felt like a victory, a moment of closure, but all I felt was emptiness. I sat on the couch for hours, replaying everything in my mind. The fights, the lies, the discovery of that damn key. It all felt so surreal, like I'd been living in someone else's nightmare. But as the hours passed, the emptiness began to shift into something else. Relief. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't stuck in limbo, questioning what was real and what was a lie. She was gone, and with her, the weight of her betrayal. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I poured myself a drink that night, a quiet toast to freedom, to starting over, to never letting myself settle for less than I deserved again. The first morning after she left felt like stepping into a new world. The sunlight streamed into the kitchen, and for the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy with tension. I made myself a simple breakfast, brewed coffee, and sat at the table, savoring the silence. It wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. Still, there were reminders of her everywhere. A stray hair tie on the counter, a mug she always used still sitting on the shelf, a pair of shoes she'd forgotten by the door. I gathered them all, packed them into a box, and shoved it in the closet. Out of sight, out of mind. The next step was telling people. I kept everything to myself during the unraveling of our marriage. But now that it was truly over, it was time to let others in. My parents were the first call. My mom cried, asking what went wrong, while my dad grumbled about how no one can be trusted these days. I didn't go into too much detail, just enough to explain why I'd be moving forward alone. Friends were a mixed bag. Some were shocked. Others quietly admitted they never liked her much. The hardest part was when they asked if I was okay, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't heartbroken anymore, but I wasn't whole either. I was just numb. Over the next week, I threw myself into reclaiming the house. It was mine now, and I needed it to feel that way. I moved furniture, painted the bedroom a new color, and swapped out the bed for something new. No traces of her were allowed to remain, not in my space, not in my head. The process was cathartic. With every brushstroke, every new piece of furniture, I felt like I was erasing her grip on my life. The house started to feel like mine, not ours. And with each passing day, I felt a little lighter. Dana, the private investigator, called me once more to check in. She had more evidence if I wanted it, texts, financial records, but I told her to hold off. I didn't need any more proof. The divorce proceedings were in motion, and I'd already taken back control of my life. One night, I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone. My thumb hovered over the gallery, where I knew photos of us still lingered. For a moment, I considered going through them, but then I thought better of it. The past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. Weeks turned into months, and the divorce progressed smoothly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence. She didn't fight me on anything. Not the house, not the finances. I think she knew she had no ground to stand on. I started therapy, mostly to process the anger and betrayal I'd been carrying. It was hard, unpacking years of trust and realizing how blind I'd been. But it also felt good, freeing even. My therapist helped me see that her actions weren't a reflection of me. They were hers alone. Friends began inviting me out again, and slowly, I started to rejoin the world. I wasn't ready for dating. Hell, I wasn't even sure if I'd ever be, but I wasn't hiding anymore. I was living. One evening, I sat on my newly redecorated patio, a beer in hand, staring at the sunset. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, the weight of a relationship that had long since rotted beneath the surface. I wasn't the same man I'd been before the key, but maybe that was a good thing. I was stronger now, smarter, and ready to build something new, something real. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I raised my bottle in a quiet toast. To freedom, I whispered, and to whatever comes next. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think.